Hello guys, and welcome to the White Rabbit Trading Channel. Before we begin, please take a moment to read the disclaimer below. Remember, I'm not a financial advisor and everything here is for educational purposes only. And if you find this analysis helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. Your support helps me create more content like this. It's not hard for you, but it's pleasant for me. Alright, let's dive in. Bitcoin has been ranging within the previous week, mainly below the overall mid-range, and we need to see how the next week opens and where price goes first. Will it take liquidity, or just open and move in one direction or the other? There are a few scenarios that might or might not happen, but as an example, I have a few scenarios where I would be prepared to get involved if I see some signs. Let's start with the bearish scenario, where it opens and makes its way down during the week, and let's say it closes like this. In this case, it would form a weekly volume block and a weekly level on the mid-range, which would make this level even stronger. It would have the time levels like daily and weekly, but also volume-based confluence. If we pull the fixed range tool, we can see a point of control right there. So logically, for a bearish continuation, we could see price then move up to this level, reject, and then spend longer here in the range or break down. A break below the weekly swing low would be a structure break, and then price could also retrace back into this level and reject there for a lower high. To be fair, it would be a good level for a trade. We would have a weekly structure break, a weekly order block on the mid-channel with a point of control, and let's imagine it would have a bigger drop, let's say to 80K. Then we could pull a fib. And that would be exactly in this area. So that scenario needs the bearish outcome to confirm, at least for now, a major top. As long as we don't see this, at least some part of it, like breaking below the weekly swing low, then the high timeframe structure remains bullish. Now let's look at the second scenario, which would lead to a longer range and not break down. Well, it would start like previously with a move down but then reverse and break above this mid-range and weekly level. In this case, it would be bullish, especially if price holds the retest of the mid-range, a strong level. We could then see continuation to the upside. Another bullish scenario. If it opens, sweeps the previous week, and makes its way up and closes above the mid-range, and maybe then retraces but manages to hold this level, then we could also see continuation to the upper side of the range. So those would be two bullish scenarios. Let's have a look at the scenario where it opens and does not make a new low but breaks above these levels. In this case, it could look like this, and it would not be the best low Bitcoin left behind, with a lot of liquidity. So what this scenario would do is open the door to come back to these levels and wipe everyone out. It might form some pattern where it has liquidity above and below and could just fake out both sides, which would trap some pattern traders. But in the end, it would be just a continuation of the range, and we would see the up or down breakout at a later stage. Of course, it can also be a mix of all these scenarios, but these are like the extremes that could happen, and I would know what to do in these situations and setups. Of course, I would have invalidation for these scenarios, but for that, we need to see which direction Bitcoin chooses first. Based on these scenario examples, one can make a potential plan. Now have a look at the daily and the local levels. Bitcoin has been chopping around for almost 2 weeks now since it made the monthly low. It is also coming near the range time where it typically forms the range lows. This time would be from today to Monday/Tuesday. This also means we could see one of the scenarios we just saw on the weekly time frame. But it would depend on which one, based on how deep Bitcoin will go. Would it take liquidity and clear this before moving up and potentially open the door for further continuation, or just form a local higher low here and continue up, leaving all the liquidity for later, and by doing so open the door for the scenario where it could fake out to the upside, take liquidity, and then reverse back to this level? Well, of course, the other scenario would come into play if we see Bitcoin just continue to range here, not making new lows but just chopping around. That would mean it has the chance to close negative and then push out of this lower part into the higher part of the range. Or even break down, as shown in the first example. But as long as this does not happen, I treat this as a range and don't get bearish on the lower part of it until I see a clear breakdown. Then I would make new plans and prepare new setups for that. For now, it's a range where we have support from around 90 to 93, and resistance on the higher part of the range. As I touched on the theme of range time, let's also look at the monthly time frame. The time for the lows is definitely past now, and if price forms new monthly lows, that could potentially open the doors for the bearish outcomes. Like in a downtrend, where Bitcoin would form a low late in the month, and that could lead to a potential breakdown. But as I said, until I don't see this, I have to treat this price action as a bullish trend and just a range until we see continuation, and then adjust the plan if the opposite happens. Now let's look at the time where it forms the highs. On average, it's day 16, which is basically today, but price is below the open, so it would not be possible to call it a monthly high time. We can see that one time we had the monthly high on the first days, and that could be the case, but for this to be confirmed, we need to see Bitcoin breaking down from this range. And until that happens, I treat it as a range, which is why I look at the time in the bullish cases but keep the bearish scenarios in mind. In the uptrend, the highs were formed on average around day 18 or 19, and in all bullish months around day 21. This would basically start the time window next week. That would mean if we see a monthly high in the average time frame, we should slowly see some bullish moves up to the monthly open, whichever scenario it chooses, form a local higher low without taking out liquidity below and then move up, as shown earlier on the weekly chart, or take out the liquidity and then move up, leaving this level cleared, and hit the next levels of interest in the monthly average time. That might potentially give some confluence if it hits the point of interest and shows some weakness by losing support levels like the monthly open and the mid-range, and then that's where I would have the target of these lows from the previous week. Of course, this also means that the monthly average move to the upside might not happen, and price could even have the chance to close negative. Let's have a look at the momentum to potentially see if something suggests a breakout or more ranging, and what needs to happen to start a bigger move. On the weekly time frame, we see momentum is down as long as Bitcoin is below 104K, but this will change tomorrow, so this will be updated in the Discord updates. Volatility is currently at extreme lows. This means it could range a bit longer, but when it starts to increase above 20 or 30% and moves in the direction of momentum, it could give an impulsive move. As mentioned before, bears would want to have it down, and bulls need to show some strength to cross the momentum up. On the 5-day time frame, we see almost the same situation, momentum pointing down and volatility at extreme lows for a bigger move sooner or later. I will show a few examples from when we saw these two things coming together. We can see whenever this signal flashed and price was in a range and momentum was down, the price held the range and did not break down. But after some time, as momentum switched up, it started to play out for some massive moves. In the previous range, it had some attempts while momentum was down and volatility was low, and it tried for a push but failed, which led to a higher low on price. Momentum then switched up, and it made a new all-time high. So what can we take from that? In the best case, Bitcoin is in a similar situation as before, where it played out to the upside and the volatility on the correction down did not catch up. As long as this does not extend to the upside, we could see price continue to range. On the daily time frame, momentum remains up if price closes above 96,200, with volatility at extreme lows. This could bring a potential move up if price remains closing bullishly above. That doesn't mean it can't take liquidity before that. However, we'd need to see how far Bitcoin manages to push up and in what time window, and whether it takes liquidity beforehand and clears this level, or leaves the door open for revisiting these lows again, which would make a breakout more difficult for now. We would then need to wait and trade the range potentially into next month. Now let's have a look at the potential lower time frame levels and the potential setups that I will look for if conditions are met. Previously, we had some setups, most of which I am still in, and I have already protected my capital and have some runners from the upper part and lower part of the range. As we discussed previously about the weekly scenarios, let's translate this into LTF price action. I don't have it as a current setup, but it would basically be the same entry as before, where I already secured some profits. However, if price would move down but form a local higher low here, we could see a few outcomes. First, logically, it holds and makes the move up, whether it forms the low today or in the upcoming days. In this case, price could form the weekly low in the first days and then move up, or it fails and makes the weekly high first instead and then moves down. Of course, this could take some time, and we might potentially range here this week, which would give it the chance to close negative as in one of the examples, and only then decide the new direction. Potentially, if price holds the support, we could see a move up to take liquidity. Another outcome is that it moves faster, either from this area here and hits the resistance first and only then revisits this level lower, as shown before in one of the weekly examples. The other scenario is where it forms a weekly low but takes out some liquidity. In that case, I would still see the range as resistance, but logically, I would not target these local lows since the business would already be done. One would have to aim way lower or, if it's bullish, look for a potential higher low, which would change the plan and turn this level into a potential scalp. By this logic, the trade from lower would target higher liquidity levels or even the bigger point of interest where we would have liquidity and a new monthly high. That's where one could see the next potential setup. But as mentioned, it depends on whether price clears the local lows first or not. If price just moves up, as in one of the weekly scenarios, and leaves all the liquidity behind, then this setup would potentially aim for those lows as a target, with an observation level on the mid-range just in case it shows some strength where I would de-risk, or if it shows weakness where I would let the trade run longer for the target. So you can see these trades depend on what happens first. Maybe they also give an entry, but instead of going lower, they continue up, invalidating the trade, where I could be hit at take profit 1 or maybe get stopped out. We need to see when it happens. Of course, we have levels at the extremes of the range, but that is simpler. If price comes down or up there, we want to see strength or weakness. Strength would be an SFP of the level and then a reclaim of the resistance, flipping it into support, where I would have an invalidation level and an entry with targets. Or strength and weakness could be a breakout. For now, though, we need to see the outcome of this local range. That's it for today's update. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. I'll keep you updated as the market develops. Until then, trade safe, and I'll see you in the next one.